Are you a Mexican or a Mexicant?
Okay, hey, and we are live. Welcome back, everyone, to Podcast Part 3, the Part 3 podcast. I am Sam Charrington here with Will Morey.
As always.
We are talking this week about Once Upon a Time in Mexico from 2003, filmed in 2001, but just needed a lot of time in the oven, apparently. Will, this was your pick, and I'm going to say right off the bat, I once read online that there are 4 types of dogs. There's doot-doots, critters, angels, and sloppy babies. What kind of dog do you think this movie is, Will?
Oh, this is 100% a sloppy baby.
Yes.
Oh my god. I had forgotten just how many subplots this movie just packs into 90 minutes.
Yes.
And how many plot twists and double crosses and triple crosses. So, I guess before we jump into it, can you explain to me the plot of this movie, and more importantly, what it is the CIA agent Sands wants? What is his goal?
Well, the filmmaker's goal is clearly to make you think he is so cool. He's just so cool, man. And the fact that he looks and dresses like Robert Rodriguez probably has nothing to do with it.
Oh my god, I'd never noticed that before.
Yeah. Like
the cowboy hat
and the shorts
and the shorts and the weird t-shirts.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, speaking of Robert Rodriguez, we'll wind the clock back here to 1992. Robert Rodriguez is a young filmmaker, and he makes a movie called El Mariachi for about $7,000, and it's a action movie, very stylish action, very stylishly edited. Action comedy, I would call it on a certain level. It's a tale of mistaken identity in a small Mexican town. Poor guitar player runs afoul of the cartel and basically is forced to become the man with no name.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous hit. It's one of those classic made for pocket change indie movies that becomes a huge smash and launches Robert Rodriguez's career as a writer and director through the 90s into the 2000s and into today. He followed it up in 1995 with Desperado, which is essentially a sequel to El Mariachi, but it's the Evil Dead 2 to El Mariachi's Evil Dead.
It's almost a remake in a way.
Yeah, it's Antonio Banderas. It's got a big all-star cast. It's got a crazy good soundtrack. He's got the budget and the resources to make clearly the movie he wanted to make the first time. Not to say that El Mariachi's bad. El Mariachi's actually really good. But it's El Mariachi with all the, style and flair to make it as polished as possible. That propels him even further into, directorial stardom. He's sort of on a par with Quentin Tarantino for a while. After Desperado, he does From Dusk Till Dawn, which is
with Quentin Tarantino,
which is a Quentin Tarantino that halfway through becomes a Robert Rodriguez vampire movie. Really fun movie. He does The Faculty after that, which is Kevin Williamson's script. That's Breakfast Club meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Also a really fun movie.
Very underrated, I think.
Very underrated.
Yeah.
I think those 3 are kind of what I would say are the definitive. Desperado, From Dusk Till Dawn, and The Faculty would be, I'd call that's definitive Rodriguez canon.
Yeah.
And then in the early 2000s, he has kind of a surprise hit with Spy Kids. Very weird, I don't even know how to describe Spy Kids. Weird 80s throwback, creepy kids action movie.
It's like an Amblin movie did a James Bond movie directed by Tim Burton.
I think of it like kind of like that live action version of The Witches. It's just kind of a weird kids James Bond nightmare.
Yeah.
But kind of a surprise hit, really critically well received. And then the next movie that he makes that comes out is Spy Kids 2. But in that little in between time, he gets a very small amount of time, and I think a smallish amount of money to make Once Upon a Time in Mexico. His third El Mariachi movie, his The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, essentially.
Right.
But it's obviously a movie where he intended it to be this much bigger, expansive ensemble action epic, and it's it just kind of falls apart under the weight of everything it's trying to do, and it's a movie that feels like he, as a filmmaker, and the script both are spread like way too thin.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this Once Upon a Time in Mexico is sort of the first one he did all digitally, wasn't it? Like, and so that's part of it too. It feels like a tech exercise in a lot of ways, and sort of being like, well, I can make a big budget action movie with these, like these cameras, and for the most part, I think the movie looks pretty good. There are some moments where it's like, oh yeah, this is very, very digital.
Yeah, I think the story is he went and visited George Lucas on the set of Attack of the Clones, and Attack of the Clones was famously Lucas was filming all in digital. But there's a bit of a difference in the kind of movie this is versus the kind of movie Attack of the Clones is, where, there's a lot, everything in that is digital. The sets are digital, pretty much everything but the main actors is a digital creation. And so you can kind of polish over the seams of this early 2000s digital look. So there are, like you said, there's some moments in this movie that just straight up look like they were shot on video.
Yeah. When things are moving too fast, that's when it's like, it looks so just processed and digital and video. Like when characters are running too fast, or the camera moves too fast, or somebody goes flying out of frame, you're like, oh, okay, this looks like it was made with a prosumer camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of filmmakers had their like romance with digital and made movies where it looks great, and then movies where it doesn't look great. Like, for Michael Mann, Michael Mann, for every Collateral, he made Public Enemies, which looks like a History Channel reenactment of gangster movies.
Yeah,
it's also starring Johnny Depp. So yeah, Will, you asked me what the plot of this movie is, and that's like asking me what does one bagel bite in a box of 12 taste like? This movie's only 100 minutes long, and it has so many characters in it, and none of them are El Mariachi. Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek take up 2/3 of the poster, and they probably are collectively in about 25% of the movie.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, El Mariachi gets some really cool action scenes. I guess that's worth something. He gets a big, motorcycle chase, and you're shaking your head and crying heavily.
No, I just the action sequence in this movie didn't really impress me all that much. That was a big thing. Is that I think they lacked the grit of the first movie and the flair of the second movie. Like, they felt really rough around the edges, but not in that super low budget charming way that you get with something like El Mariachi.
Well, it's sort of indicative of the movie as a whole, because it's like, it would be like, I'm having fun with this, and then something would happen where I would get confused as to what was happening and who was where and why they were doing it, and then I'd sort of lose my train of thought, and the action scene would be over. And that's kind of how the movie felt to me this watch, anyway, where it's like it'd go along and I'd be like, I'm having fun, I'm kind of grooving to this, and then I'd be like, I don't understand what's happening, and I'd get confused.
No, I mean, no one character in this ever has any room to breathe.
No,
it's so. All right, the plot. I think Johnny Depp might break it down to Eva Mendes at some point what he's trying to do. I think ultimately he's just trying to get a bunch of money on his hands. But so El Mariachi, at the end of Desperado, has confronted the cartel boss who is indirectly responsible for the death of his girlfriend in the first movie, who also turned out to be his brother. And killed him, and has set aside his violent ways and rode off into the sunset with Salma Hayek, Carolina, his girlfriend. In this one, he's now got Carolina and him have a kid, and they run afoul of her ex-boyfriend, a bloodthirsty general named Marquez, who she shoots in the chest with a shotgun, and by the next day he seems fine, and ultimately he kills her and their daughter and leaves El Mariachi for dead. This is all conveyed in flashbacks throughout the movie, I should note. So if you went into this movie thinking, ooh, Salma Hayek's in this, and she looks great, and she's going to be fun, and she's going to kick ass. No.
She gets one scene where she throws some knives at people,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool.
It's cool, yeah. No, I remember they milked the bejesus out of that in her one chase scene in every trailer.
Yeah.
But she was perhaps for the best, I think, off doing Frida. Probably deciding I should not commit myself to more than one Harvey Weinstein project at a time.
Oh,
Jesus Christ. And so the movie proper begins with Johnny Depp as FBI agent Sands, and Mexico's his beat, and he's just walking it. And he is trying to facilitate a coup against the president of Mexico, who seems like he's kind of an okay guy, but he's standing up to the cartels led by Barrio, who is Willem Dafoe in brownface
For some reason.
for reasons. And Barrio is bankrolling a coup against the president that would put Marquez in power. And Agent Sands wants El Mariachi to kill Marquez, but only after the president has been assassinated, because he wants the coup, but he doesn't want Marquez in power. He's also going to take some money and run off with Eva Mendes, who plays a cop. He also
an ATF agent.
agent, or like a Mexican ATF, like a federale, essentially. He also recruits Ruben Blades, who's a retired FBI agent who Willem Dafoe killed his partner, to help him do something. That's essentially what Johnny Depp's plan is. Along the way, while he's meddling in the affairs of state of the nation of Mexico, he's killing waitresses and chefs in cold blood, and he's just being generally kind of a sleazebag, threatening El Mariachi's life, having the other guitar makers in his village killed. Now, all of this would make you think that Johnny Depp's character is the villain here, but no, he's just so cool, dude.
He turns into Zatoichi by the end of the movie.
Yeah, he's Zatoichi. He gets his eyes taken out, but he still can kick ass. And he's got a fake arm that he takes off and puts back on. He's so cool. And he ruins this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's because he's got the character has his fingers in everything, and Depp is just sort of just acting strange. He's not even making choices. He's just sort of being weird. Maybe he's just being Johnny Depp. I don't know. But
Johnny Depp is so lucky this movie came out right after Pirates of the Caribbean, where all of America was on board for weird Johnny Depp performances. Like when Pirates of the Caribbean came out, no one really knew what the hell to expect from it. We all thought it was going to be terrible, but then Johnny Depp shows up in it, and he's just doing this crazy character that kind of knocks the movie up a level in weirdness and fun. And he got an Oscar nomination for it, and that's what turned him into the eccentric, Keith Richards looking star he is today. But right after that, they snuck in a release of Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and it's very much a Johnny Depp's making choices. He's gonna put on. We're gonna wear a lot of fake mustaches. Yeah, he's gonna do a Marlon Brando impression for no reason at some point.
Oh God, right? Oh my God. There's so much, and there's so much of him in it. He's really the glue that holds the story together, for better or worse.
Which is kind of why the story doesn't hold together.
Yeah.
This guy should be the villain, because the first movie and the second movie, the main villain is the cartel guy.
Right.
I think a great villain for El Mariachi would be CIA agent who manipulates him, and El Mariachi has to just if you must do that he's lost his family again, like, because that's how the second movie starts, is after
Right.
his girlfriend has been killed. If you're gonna do that, it's him learning to fight for Mexico. Like, at the end, they have
Yeah.
suddenly he has this turn in the third act where he's like, the president is a good man. We are sons of Mexico. If that was it, if he becomes like like a Mexican superhero, basically, I think that's a cool way to go, and it can
Yeah.
fit the epic scale of this, because the movie that Robert Rodriguez compares this to obviously is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the third Sergio
Right.
Leone Man with No Name movie, but that movie's still pretty damn focused. It's right there in the title. It's only about 3 people.
It's interesting that he compares it to that one and not Once Upon a Time in the West, which is so much more big and epic and expansive and sort of not all over the place, but there's so much going on in that movie.
But again,
and it's also like almost 3.5 hours long.
And Once Upon a Time in the West is also still only about 4 people. It's got a good, a bad, and an ugly, and Claudia Cardinal. This movie has, in addition to sort of your stable of like Robert Rodriguez regulars who show up in sizable bit parts, your Cheech Marin, your Danny Trejo, you've got Johnny Depp, you've got Antonio Banderas, you've got The Promise, The Idea, The Whisper of Salma Hayek, you've got Eva Mendes, Ruben Blades, Mickey Rourke, Willem Dafoe, General Marquez, the president's aide,
right, there are like subplots within subplots in this movie.
Willem Dafoe's creepy plastic surgeon, Dr. Guevara.
That's right, there's a double switching plastic surgery subplot, and oh my god.
Will, this movie...
It gave me a headache. I am so sorry.
No,
I am so sorry.
I mean, I guess if I'm being honest, it's better than RoboCop 3. Like... Enrique Iglesias and the guy from Cinema Paradiso are the other 2 mariachis in this. They definitely ran out of weapons you can turn a guitar case into once they've turned it into a remote control car.
Oh boy.
No, it's, and I think ultimately my problem with the movie is that and I'm guessing this is because he didn't have a ton of time and he didn't have a ton of resources. Robert Rodriguez is credited as just about everything on this. He edited it. It was chopped and scored. Yes, and directed, and he wrote the script. And the difference between that and Desperado is in Desperado, he's not doing all of those things.
Right.
And it's not to say Robert Rodriguez can't do all those things. Like, this movie is more than competently made. But Desperado has a different cinematographer, and it has Los Lobos doing the score in this movie doesn't hold a candle to the Desperado soundtrack. No. Like this, like apart from the Pistolero, like boop, 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 that was in all the trailers. This doesn't have that great soundtrack. It doesn't have like, it relies on Malagueña as sort of a running score through it. So it's using sort of, not original music, and it's not shot and edited as crisply as Desperado is. Like, the editing is really choppy and all over the place, and you can see the seams, like especially in the digital effects and the action stuff.
Well, it feels like the movie was also like 3.5 hours long to begin with, because there are just so many things happening and so many characters, and none of them have any time to like do anything. They just sort of show up, and it almost feels like, I think I had texted this to you, Sam, it almost feels like they're preparing to be, either they walked in from a different movie or they're all getting ready for their television spinoff.
Yeah. Like, I know they did a From Dusk Till Dawn TV series. This feels like the kind of characters you would introduce in a From Dusk Till Dawn TV series when you have 6, 8, 9 episodes to really like build your world out. And it's like, there's no rule that says that that Once Upon a Time in Mexico has to just be the revenge story for El Mariachi. I think just he still has to be the driving force. The thing with the Man with No Name as a character is he's still like in control. Like, he's still the driving force of the plot. It's the first move. The first man with a fistful of dollars is Yojimbo. He rides into town and he's playing two sides against each other. For a few dollars more, he teams up with another bounty hunter, and that character is the one out for revenge. And he just sort of works with this guy to bring down a gang from the inside. The good, the bad, and the ugly. He's the good. And he has to face off against, he's competing with the bad and the ugly to find some buried gold in the middle of the Civil War. So they run into all these characters in the good, the bad, and the ugly along their way. But the movie is really about him.
About finding the gold.
Yeah, and sort of the bond between him and Eli Wallach as Tuco. And like, Lee Van Cleef is the villain, but he's just the villain in that. He's the bad. He doesn't have much to him. This, it's like, just like to follow Barrio's thread, and he's not even an essential character to this movie. He's a Mexican drug cartel boss, and he intends to kill the president of Mexico, install General Marquez as his replacement, while also faking his death in a faked plastic surgery related mishap, where he will in fact get a facelift and put in his place a body double that everyone will think was him murdered by the Federales, and then he will disappear and lead a new life while installing his daughter as the head of his evil empire, which leads to him running around for the last half hour of this movie looking like fucking Darkman for some reason.
That's what I have in my notes too.
Oh, okay. And again, you don't need Barrio in this at all. He doesn't. No. He never interacts with El Mariachi. He has no personal stake in things. Barrio and Marquez should have been one character,
right?
And Agent Sands should have been the bad guy that is holding El Mariachi's family hostage, or holding his village hostage to manipulate him, get him to do what he wants. There, that's a simple movie. Yeah. You can if you want, you can have Ruben Blades and Mickey Rourke in there if you want, but you don't need
Mickey Rourke's Chihuahua.
Hey, you know what? I honestly, I kind of thought Mickey Rourke, Ruben Blades, and Moko the Chihuahua all wandered in from like a better movie. Like they're all like they're all doing they're like Ruben Blades and Mickey Rourke are trying. They're like trying to make they're trying to do like a real movie in there.
And it seems like they're making Traffic in a way, or like a silly version of Traffic.
Yeah,
kind of.
like they're like just this movie's like maybe not coincidentally, kind of like the first season of Book of Boba Fett, in that it's very distracted and doesn't seem to be at all interested in its main character.
Yeah,
and
that's about right.
Yeah, and the problem is Antonio Banderas is too charismatic to sideline as just kind of a block of wood. Like, every time he's given a chance to show a little flair, you're like, oh, he's Antonio Banderas. He's awesome. He's super charming. I want to see him blow Agent Sand's head off, you know?
Yeah, there are just so many. In my notes, I'm just like, how many plot twists? Another plot twist. Yeah. All right, another plot twist.
Ava Mendes is Johnny Depp's girlfriend on the down low, but she's also Willem Dafoe's daughter. Right. And she has, like, the movie really falls apart right about when she has a heel turn, and she and Barrio remove Johnny Depp's eyes.
For no, I didn't. That was one of those things where it's like, why did they do that? I didn't remember. I remembered that he lost his eyes. I didn't remember why, and I realized why that was is because there's no reason for them to remove his eyes. Why didn't they just kill him?
Yeah, because he's followed by one of their guys who then immediately tries to kill him.
Yeah,
like in all the marketing, they had him on the poster and in all the trailers, him in his like black vest with his sunglasses, and he's got his black gloves and his guns. And in this, he's blind, and he's got this little kid that he's waylaid into. It's weird enough that it would be funny in another movie, but in this, it's like it is such a third act. Like you're watching him get to the presidential palace for reasons we can't quite put a finger on, while a bunch of faceless soldiers and faceless Day of the Dead partygoers have like a civil war in the background. If you're having trouble following this episode of Podcast Part 3, it's because we had trouble following this movie, and I only watched it like 2 hours ago.
Oh boy. I mean, it almost feels like like a lot of the John Woo Hong Kong movies have like these like ridiculous plots with so many like double crossing and things like that. And it kind of feels like that, but like cranked up to 1,000.
Yeah, and it has like a lot of non sequiturs that don't really matter.
Yeah.
Like El Mariachi gets captured by Danny Trejo and then immediately escapes. It doesn't have anything to do. It does not factor in with the plot. El Mariachi never is face to face with either villain until the very last scene he's with Marquez, and they
Right.
they
And
interact.
he just kills him immediately.
And they've
almost.
never interacted before, even in flashbacks, except shooting at each other.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like the amount of subplots and characters crammed into it is like supposed to be kind of a joke almost. It's supposed to be like sort of this everything but the kitchen sink. But the problem, and there's a way to do it so that it's actually kind of entertaining. And I think Rodriguez actually did this with Planet Terror, his half of Grindhouse, where it's like the subplots are and on top of each other and characters on top of each other are kind of part of the fun and part of the joke. But here, it's just so hard to follow that you can't really kind of get into it and get into like the fun of it.
Yeah, it kind of does that with Sin City as well.
And yeah,
but Sin
too,
City also has that sort of anthology thing where it has 3 different stories that it tells,
Right.
and the characters all kind of wander into each other's stories here and there. The problem is with this is it's supposed to be following this one character.
Right.
Like your hero, he's there, but he's not really there. Like this movie, the opening sequence, the movie starts with Cheech Marin and Johnny Depp talking, and Cheech is telling him about El Mariachi and Carolina and General Marquez. She was with Marquez, but she was with El Mariachi. And they're talking about General Marquez like we should know who the fuck that is. And they're showing shots of him that are like from later in the movie, actually. And the whole thing's edited in a way at first where I'm like, did Antonio Banderas die and they have to use what footage they've got?
Or he like suddenly had a scheduling conflict and couldn't be part of the shoot or whatever.
I don't know. It's compared to the opening sequence of Desperado, which is Steve Buscemi kind of doing the same thing. He's telling all the folks in a bar about El Mariachi coming in, and they do such a good job of building up Antonio Banderas. While still being like funny and it's really well edited, and Cheech is there too. This just feels like the energy is just, it also doesn't help. It's just Johnny Depp plays every scene. Anytime someone gives him information, he's just kind of like, whatever, I don't care. I'm not interested. Yeah, I know what L means, thank you. Are you a Mexican or a Mexican? Danny Trejo, international treasure Danny Trejo, has to look another man in the eye and receive that line with a straight face and then say earnestly back, I'm a Mexican. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's and actually a lot of this movie feels like kind of Robert Rodriguez's MO from here on out. Like a lot of his movies are just overstuffed, overcrammed, and because he is this one-man band, no one is telling him, slow your roll, buddy. Let's cut down a subplot or two. I mean, it works in Sin City because of the anthology format, but like every other movie, it's like just crammed and stuffed to the gills with stuff.
Like, I'll say this for Robert Rodriguez. The guy, like, he's one of those guys from the 90s that made independent filmmaking and making movies on a low budget and the craft of filmmaking seem accessible to a lot of people. Yeah. Like, he's one of those guys that always did a really good job with Blu-ray or DVD releases and the special features and the behind the scenes stuff. He really cared about that, making that content, informative and fun and something you'd want to watch. Like, Kevin Smith would be another example of that. Like, Kevin Smith always had like really good commentaries and really good behind the scenes stuff. The Peter Jackson, same way with the Lord of the Rings movies. But I watched Penny Lane's documentary listening to Kenny G recently, and Kenny G is inarguably talented. Like, there's a reason he's so successful, because he is incredibly talented, but because he found that success with that sound and that style, he's never chosen to hone it or develop it or have it evolve. He doesn't seem like a particularly curious musician about learning about the craft and the genre of music he performs in. And I would kind of equate Robert Rodriguez to a Kenny G of filmmaking, in that he inarguably is a guy with a style and a voice, and he has these actors that come back and do every one of his roles. But if you go back and watch this and like the first couple Spy Kids, and you watch the stuff he's made more recently, they don't look all that different. They don't feel all that different. Whereas the guy he gets compared to the most, Quentin Tarantino, whether you like his movies or not, absolutely has taken great pains to make his movies look better and better. And when they look worse, it's because he's lost a key piece of the team he's assembled. Tarantino always has great cinematographers. Obviously, he always cares about the quality of the score and the music. And he had one of the best editors in the business until she passed away, Sally Menke. And Rodriguez just doesn't seem to... I think he tends to spread himself too thin, and I think this is the beginning of that. And when he does it right after this, you get something like Sin City, but it only takes a nudge for it to become Sin City: A Dame to Kill For.
Or the two Machete movies.
Oh my God.
Which have, I think, which are like all the problems of this movie cranked up to just the nth degree, where it's just like, I am cramming every single dumb idea I've ever had into these movies.
Yeah, and just, like, combined with just the movies looking increasingly bad, like just like going from looking like it's set in a real dusty Mexican town to like looking like it's set on a soundstage or a blue screen. You go from El Mariachi and Desperado have those real good 80s and 90s squibs, the real raspberry preserves. This one, everyone just sort of shoots sparks when they get shot, and by the time you get to Planet Terror and Mariachi, it feels like digital squibs.
It's all digital. Yeah. I mean, and I think for me, I like Planet Terror a bit, but I think Planet Terror and Death Proof only work really together as Grindhouse, like as an actual the 2-part movie, but double feature. But again, I think that is sort of like the joke. The fun of Planet Terror is that it's so over the top and so excessive. And my problem with Machete is that it just feels like the excessiveness just becomes excessiveness to be excessive, where it felt targeted and in a comedic fashion in Planet Terror.
Yeah, you get the sense with Machete and Machete Kills that Robert Rodriguez may not be in on the joke anymore.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Like, Machete's fun as a Grindhouse trailer with Danny Trejo. Yeah, and absolutely you should make action movies with Danny Trejo as the lead. He's awesome. Machete Kills is... I don't like to bag on anyone's movies, because
we know how hard it is.
It's like pulling teeth to get one episode of Where's Waldo written, let alone made. But Machete Kills is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It has nothing new to say comedically or as an action movie. No one in it seems to like care. It's not funny, and it's not exciting, and it looks terrible. It feels like one of those Jimmy Kimmel parodies he does after the Oscars.
What's interesting though about Robert Rodriguez now is his pivot to he does Alita with this big budget. I mean, he's basically doing a James Cameron riff, and I like Alita a lot. It doesn't feel like a Robert Rodriguez movie though.
It's a little bit like, I think he kind of was a little bit more of a gun for hire for that, but he's a good director. Robert Rodriguez, if you gave him all the resources and you give him all the tools, he's going to make a good looking movie. And Alita is probably one of the best manga anime adaptations out of Hollywood, at least. Real low bar, but it's a fun movie. I like Rosa Salazar as the lead. The cast is good. It's got robot dog. It's got Jeff Fahey as a robot. With a bunch
of robot
dogs. A robot cowboy with robot dogs, and you don't get nearly enough of that. You don't. No, you do not give me. The bad guy kills a little dog, and Jeff Fahey's like, "Fuck this," and he sicks his robot dogs on him. It's the best part of the movie. You know me. I just have written here in big letters, Moko, and then a heart. Because I'm like, I don't want anything to happen to Mickey Rourke's little chihuahua, because you can tell he cares about him. He was buying him a taco. You can tell he's like, hey, Pollo. And he points to Moko. He's like, get Moko some pollo taco. And I'm like, oh, he's a good guy. He takes a bullet for Moko.
That's right, he does.
Oh,
He does.
yeah. No.
But then Robert Rodriguez is now in the Star Wars world, and I mean, as much as Book of Boba Fett is sort of all over the place, like most Robert Rodriguez projects.
The book of everyone but you, Boba Fett.
Well, it was about Boba Fett until it wasn't, and then it was 2 episodes of a different show.
Oh my god. Why did they do that with Luke? Why?
Oh boy. I hate CGI Luke. I hate CGI Luke.
I don't care for CGI Luke. I definitely don't care for, like, what's the acting equivalent of auto-tune? Like, it's not, it's like, we don't need Mark Hamill because this thing is this
thing has figured it out for us.
It's the DJ 2000 from The Simpsons. Have you heard about those clowns in Washington? What a bunch of clowns.
Oh my god! Yeah, I don't know whose idea that was. I can't imagine it was Rodriguez's. I feel like that was probably Jon Favreau and Filoni. I don't know.
I like Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni has done so much good for the Star Wars franchise, but I'm worried that it is becoming like you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become George Lucas.
Oh my god. I mean, I don't like the fact that Luke shows up in Mandalorian. I don't like the fact that he shows up here, but the way that he shows up is just awful.
No, and it's fine if you want to give everyone a little taste of Luke, or if you could have hinted at it more.
Right.
It looked weird. The effects look weird, but if that was the last time we were going to see Grogu, it was an effective moment because you knew that he was going off to be a Jedi. Unfortunately, as we know, becoming a Jedi with Luke Skywalker after the fall of the Empire is not a good long-term business model. So obviously fans want to make sure we know that Grogu's okay. So I think that's... You're listening to Podcast Part 3. We're talking about Once Upon a Time in Mexico, a movie that has nothing to do with Star Wars, except for the fact that Danny Trejo is now in both.
Well, okay. Well, we'll punt the Star Wars discussion
to next week when we talk
about
about Batman Forever.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back on track. As a part 3, how does this stack up? We've done, what is this, episode 8 now? Is that right?
Something like that. Sure.
Yeah.
We've done 3 Halloweens. You made me watch RoboCop 3. I gave you the gift that was Dawn of the Day of the Dead. Yeah, it's something like that. I mean, in terms of intent, I think it's a great idea for a part 3. Yeah, go big, build your world out, give your character new types of characters to interact with. In terms of execution, it falls apart. It's I don't want to say it's on the level of RoboCop 3, but it's got a lot of the same problems as Halloween Kills, where it's just like cul-de-sacs with characters that are either not very interesting or confusing or perhaps too interesting and more interesting the movie's more interested in them than they are in its lead. Yeah. And the movie was marketed as like, the married couple action heroes, sort of like the mom and dad and Spy Kids. And that's kind of what I wanted. I would have loved to see bickering El Mariachi and Carolina kicking ass together. I always want like action movie Nick and Nora Charles. But
yeah, I mean, and because the promise of that opening scene where that she's throwing the knives and he's got the shotgun guitar, like that is like so much fun.
I haven't, I'm sure they explain the commentary or in like interviews. I'm sure there is a reason why there's only like 3 minutes of Salma Hayek in this movie.
Yeah.
By the way, he does the same thing in Machete Kills. He kills Jessica Alba right at the beginning as well.
That's right, he does.
Yeah.
It's been too long since I've seen it, and I didn't like that movie enough to remember any of it. But
Yeah. But the thing is, if you're not going to let your character be the active driver of the story, you at least have to evolve them as a character. Give them a new dynamic to work in. This is just backsliding El Mariachi into kind of the dynamic of Desperado, but not doing it as well as Desperado.
I won't do this a lot, but I do want to pull out Roger Ebert's review of this, which he actually liked the movie. He gave it 3 stars.
Sure.
Let's see. Rodriguez talks about how easy digital filmmaking makes it for him and the actors. No fussing over lights, no worrying about film costs, lots of freedom to try things different ways. Once Upon a Time in Mexico sometimes feels as if he's winging it. But you have to admit he has an instinctive, exuberant feel for moving images. I'm not sure a thoughtful and coherent story can be made using his methods, but maybe that's not what he's interested in doing.
Sure, fine. I feel like Ebert's giving him a hell of an out there.
I think so too.
Like, no, I've seen, like, Robert Rodriguez. He's not Quentin Tarantino. I don't think he's ever really done anything that has, the impact or the just sort of the bravado of a Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
But he's like a fun genre screenwriter and director, and I think the problem is I just don't think he is interested in making his movies look better or getting back to basics. Because what was the last thing he did? We did the Shark Boy and Lava Girl sequel.
Yeah, well, I mean, was that the last thing?
That was the last movie he did
before Alita, or was that after?
That was after. I think.
Oh, that's right, because that was a Netflix.
Yeah, that was just last year.
Right.
Like Alita, yeah. I almost feel like is an anomaly on there because Alita was in development for like ever. Cameron was going to direct it, and then he got busy making Avatar 1 through 17 or something. and like Robert Rodriguez has produced a lot of stuff. Like he produced the Predators sequel, right. And it's like I think he just wants to be able to play with the stuff he likes to play with, and he's not all that interested in changing up what he's doing as a filmmaker. But I just don't think he's making anything. He's playing the hits, but I wish he played them better. It's kind of feels like almost like a tribute band version of himself now.
Or doing just doing covers and sort of you want him to branch out. You want him to have like a Fury Road or something like that. You want him to like really push himself as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and he's also like he's not like George Miller or Sam Raimi where in between the sort of cult classics he has like interesting kind of little movies. Right.
Right, and he's more like George Lucas. He's really a lot more interested in the technology side of things and is sort of more intrigued about whether or not he can do it than anything story related or what that means in terms of the film he's making. It's like, well, what can we do technology wise? How can I make this how can I make my shoot faster? How can I shoot this when an actor's only available for 2 days or, however, because you read about the Sin City production and like half the time, most of those actors weren't on set with each other.
Yeah. And he made that work, at least in the first one. I mean, this isn't your fault, Will. We don't blame you. But I wanted to have more fun with this movie.
I did too. I actually remembered it being better than it is. I remembered having a lot of fun with this, and I remember thinking it was overstuffed, but I remember being like, well, it's like a food that you like overeat. You're kind of like, oh, that was too much, but I enjoyed it when it was going in.
No, this kind of felt like when you make 12 bagel bites, but you don't cook them for long enough, so they're still kind of cold in the middle, but you still eat them because you're hungry, and you don't feel great. And you've wasted a box of bagel bites.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm editing the Matrix Revolutions episode, and we talked for 90 minutes about that, so...
Yeah, we've got a lot to say, clearly, about Once Upon a Time in Mexico, considering we just did a Star Wars sidetrack, so,
Well, whatever. When we get to Star Wars, I can just edit all the conversations we've already had about Star Wars into an episode and be done with it.
It's true.
It's,
It's true.
Look, we're we're heading towards. We have a destiny, and it will be talking about those 3 Star Wars movies.
The Star Wars Part 3 trilogy.
Yes, the Palpatine trilogy.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, and I don't know when we're going to get to that, because I feel like once we do that, we have to just end the podcast because there'll be nothing left to talk about. Next week, we're heading to Gotham City. We're heading to 2 very different. First, we're heading to the Day Glow candy coated 1995 sugar rush that is Gotham City in Batman Forever.
Hell yeah.
Baby, I want a minute on a kiss from a rose on the grave. Oh, I'm excited. I am excited. This movie was huge.
It was so big. Oh my God. And it was the coolest thing to see when you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
It was that summer, I was like, this is the greatest movie ever made.
Like, I can imagine a 9-year-old getting a 9-year-old a few years ago getting to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That's like the good movie equivalent of what we got when I was 9 years old and I got Batman Forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was just like, it's a giant toy ad. It's a giant cartoon. Jim Carrey's here. He's going to fight the Batman.
And Nicole Kidman just looking fantastic.
Yeah, and he's going to have Robin. Oh, he's going to have Two-Face. And they cast Tommy Lee Jones, which should be brilliant casting, and it's not. And then the week after that, we're heading to Pittsburgh for The Dark Knight Rises.
Pittsburgh and downtown New York and LA.
That's right. It's Pittsburgh, but with like a real obvious shot of the U.S. Bank building at one point. It's like, well, that's not in Gotham City. I saw them destroy that in Independence Day. Dark Knight Rises. Talk about another movie where that's another everyone involved is just sort of dragging themselves out of bed to make the movie.
Well, then what are we doing after that, Sam? It's your pick. Or are you going to wait until Dark Knight Rises?
I'm going to wait. I think I know what I want to pick. I saw it's streaming, and I'm going to think on it just because it's horror, and I worry we've done too much horror. So I'd say of my 2 choices, it's either going to be a horror movie or an action movie.
Okay.
Either way, It's going to be better than this.
That's good.
Yeah, no,
that's good that you're not going to pay me back for my bad choices.
Well, that's like paying us both back. I have to watch it and talk about it too. You know. No, you'll get it right eventually. 3rd time's the charm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will say if you haven't seen El Mariachi and if you haven't seen Desperado, those movies are a lot of fun. El Mariachi is really fun, super low budget, really stylish, early 90s action movie, and Desperado it's kind of the peak of Robert Rodriguez. It's the movie that basically made Antonio Banderas a star. It's a fun, sexy, badass action movie. And if you like it and you want something that kind of feels a little bit like it, check out Once Upon a Time in Mexico. But it is a sloppy baby. It
is just, it's all over the place. That's the only way to describe it. It's all over the place. But if you like sort of the style and characters and vibe, particularly of Desperado, because this sort of carries over that more than El Mariachi, then I'd say it's worth watching. Both Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico are on Netflix right now. So.
Yes, they are. And also, we're big fans of From Dusk Till Dawn and The Faculty. Fun movies.
Absolutely check out The Faculty, because I think The Faculty is super underrated.
Yeah, underrated movie. You've got young Josh Hartnett. You've got Elijah Wood. Jordana Brewster's in it. Clea Duvall's in it. And then like all the teachers at the school are various stars too. You got Robert Patrick. You've got Salma Hayek's there. Famke Janssen. It's a fun movie.
And Jon Stewart too.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's like a young Jon Stewart shows up as the science teacher. Shooter McGavin's Elijah Wood's dad. Fun movie. A lot of fun. Very much of that Scream era of movies, but it's Kevin Williamson's like, I want to do my Body Snatchers in high school movie.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I will say, Will, I will see you in Gotham City. I'm excited because this is going to be real dumb. It's going to be so dumb, and and
So fun. I haven't watched this movie in a long time.
I watched
really
some of
looking
it
forward
like
to
last
it.
year out of like pandemic boredom, and I mean, it's as goofy as you remember.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as Batman and Robin, but I don't know if that's to its benefit or its detriment. Like
Right.
that's where I landed on it. I'm like, I don't know if this would be better if it was dumber or if it was more competent.
We'll get into that next week.
We will. And until then, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for following. We're on Twitter at Podcast Part 3. That's the number 3. Will, as always, a pleasure and a delight.
Always.
And
This is great.
Yeah,
This is
this is always fun. And I will see you next week.
That's right.